Hi, welcome to lesson 16 of the Special Operations Candidate course. We're getting towards the end of INDOC, and in this lesson we're going to talk about a summary of those attrition methods that we mentioned earlier, just to recap those ideas and repeat them once more, because you'll find that a lot of the ideas that are really important in this course we're going to repeat all throughout the curriculum, and that's one of the ways that we kind of drill it into your head so that you remember it, and you will also hopefully remember how to deal with the problem. If it's associated with a problem, you'll remember how to deal with that problem to not have, the negative effects of that problem affecting you through your pipeline. So the first thing we talked about was really mental unpreparedness. Okay, when we talked about no-shows and the category of mental unpreparedness, we talked about expectations and core beliefs. That's all forms of mental unpreparedness. So we're just going to put mental there, and we'll say that these are various types of attrition. And this is kind of, again, it's in a nutshell. It's very summarized. And we talked about character. We talked about having confidence. We talked about fears. Okay. We also talked about having correct expectations, or having incorrect expectations, or false expectations. We talked about having the proper core values. Okay. And we talked values or beliefs, by the way. Those kind of be used interchangeably, but they generally mean the same kinds of things. The word core is significant, and it means basically what you're about, what you're based on. So whether you use values or beliefs or whatever terminology, if you're talking about those core ideas, okay. Another thing we talked about is physical preparedness. And here we have typical physical athletic qualities. We're going to work on strength. We're going to work on speed. We're going to work on endurance. We're going to use those to lead us to high levels of power output. Okay? And as we talked about being injured, I want to mention in the physical domain, we also are interested in resilience. Okay? We want you to be very resilient and resistant to injury by any means that we can prepare you ahead of time. Because obviously we don't want you to go through all this preparation in order to have some bad luck and injure yourself to the point where you're an admin drop and everybody thinks you were a great guy and we know you would have made it through pipeline, and there's absolutely no reason we would get rid of you on purpose except you have a broken leg, right? We don't want that to happen to you. So we want to be interested in resilience as well. And third, you have technical preparation, okay? And technical preparation could be, depending on the particular field you're getting into, could involve academics, could involve specific performance standards, as I said with diving. Okay, diving, you're going to have specific performance standards depending on the pipeline that you're going into. It's a skill that you're going to have to be able to pick up. There's probably no doubt among most of the been there, done that's about the ability of preparing yourself with certain basic skills or just an acquaintance or familiarization with certain activities having a significant positive effect on your outcome there in pipeline. So essentially, if you're not worried about the basic building blocks of those technical skills, of those performance standards, if you're not worried about that in pipeline because you already learned that somewhere, you can focus on the more important stuff and the more nitty-gritty detail stuff that it's harder to pay attention to and harder to pick up in short periods of time. If everybody else is learning this for the very first time, and you've kind of seen it before and been exposed to it, or maybe even learned some of this stuff before, you're going to have somewhat of an obvious advantage, okay? And our program is about giving you every advantage that we can possibly give you. You're up against some significant odds. So in order to beat those odds, we're going to give you every advantage we possibly can. So if you have time to do it, we will cover technical aspects of the career that you've chosen as far as academics and performance standards and familiarization. And along with that comes fear inoculation. And I mentioned fears over here in the mental category, and they are mental, but the reason I put it here as well is because fear inoculation is very interrelated with technical disciplines. A lot of time, things that bring up fear are technical or critical skills is what we call them in the curriculum. Things that you're going to have to learn to do in order to perform in that particular career. So even if it's not overly technical, maybe it's just swimming, okay? Some people have a significant fear of water that affects their ability to perform when it comes to water survival or swim training or whatever you're doing in the water. And if that's the case, we need to get to a point of fear inoculation where we've taught you how to deal with or overcome that fear. So in essence, you can do what you need to do. Either the fear doesn't exist anymore or it exists in such a way that you can handle it now. And it's not pulling you away from your focus, which is on performance of that activity. So even something as simple as swimming, if somebody has a significant fear of water, it should be something covered because there's a large possibility that it causes technical attrition when it comes to dealing with activities that have to do with that fear. Okay? And obviously when you get into things where people have kind of a more phobic fear, such as claustrophobia and diving or being alone in the water by yourself, underwater, under pressure, or free fall jumping, as far as getting somewhere militarily. When you do things like that, those are more phobic fears where people have significant fears of heights or claustrophobia. They get kind of crazy, right? So if we don't deal with that up front, if we don't do that fear inoculation, there's a very high chance that regardless how good they are mentally and physically, that they may wind up still having some serious technical attrition possibility there, or likelihood for that matter, depending on how bad the fear is. So we talk about fear inoculation because we intend to correct by fear inoculation as much of that fear-related technical step as we can. Okay? So when we look at all these things, this is where we get the focus of our training program. And let me remind you, so the part you're in right now is INDOC. We're just teaching you the basics about, everything in this case, and this is why we're learning this kind of stuff. After you're done with INDOC, you're going to do psychology. Psychology is where you're going to learn techniques and methods to build positive character. You're going to learn how to build on your successes in the past to build your confidence. You're going to try and overcome and eliminate your fears. Not necessarily technically through fear inoculation, but more through a psychological means. You're going to learn how to get the correct expectations of the career you're interested in, and you're going to learn the importance and how to figure out what your values and beliefs are, or change those values and beliefs to align with kind of the standard values and beliefs of your career path. You're going to learn that in psych, and that's going to be the very next section once we get done with INDOC. Then you're going to finish psych and you're going to go to physiology. When you go to physiology, not only are you going to learn how to build primary athletic qualities such as strength, speed, and endurance. Those are going to allow you to produce power, which is infinitely valuable as an athlete. And make no mistake, you're going to be an athlete of the highest caliber in most cases in special operations. The more athletic you are, the higher your potential for being operationally successful and operationally useful. And we're going to teach you how to be resilient. We're going to teach you how to properly fuel yourself, to fuel your body for this kind of performance while minimizing your chance of illness and injury, and kind of roll it up into one big ball. And we're going to teach you how to recover so that you can train more often with more volume and just basically work your way to success, which is, it's not really a secret. It's one of the common ways actually of training Olympic caliber athletes. They work their way to success. They find ways to work more at what they do, and because they work more than anyone else, they often win more than anyone else. And we're going to cover technical aspects. When we get out of physiology, we're going to get into something I call critical skills. Okay, and critical skills is where we learn if you're going to be in a career that requires diving, this is where you get a cursory introduction to diving and make sure that you're okay with it. We get you fear inoculated to it. You're not, freaking out about being underwater or being blacked out with a blackout mask by yourself or anything like that. We want to cover that stuff before you get to pipeline, okay? So you know what you're up against, and so we know, and so you know that you've already kind of done this before. That familiarity leads back to mental preparation. When you're familiar, that's what fear inoculation is. When you're familiar with the activity that causes you fear, it no longer causes you that degree of fear anymore. So we're going to cover academics as it relates to those things. We're going to teach you some of the basics about, for instance, diving. It's like my favorite example of all time. We're going to teach you the required basics just as they would if you went to an introductory class on diving, on scuba diving or whatever. Okay, so you're going to kind of have that basic knowledge up front, not have to focus so hard on it during pipeline, because you're going to have a lot of things to juggle when you get to that point in pipeline, and knowing the very basics of that stuff is definitely going to be a step in the right direction for you. We're going to cover that, and then if we have time to continue to train with you, we may pass the point of critical skills and get to something that I call follow-on skills. If we get to follow-on skills, you're going to be learning higher level skills. We're going to attempt to not get in technical detail too much depth with these. And the reason we don't do that, because we don't want to teach you what pipeline instructors call bad habits. And it doesn't mean necessarily that the habits are bad or that's the wrong way of doing something, but for them and what they're about to teach you, it might be the wrong way of doing something. So if we practice a lot of follow-on skills, let's say we do, let's say shooting is involved in your line of work, marksmanship, firearms type shooting, and we teach you a very specific way to shoot. Okay, it could be super effective, but if your instructors are going to teach you a different way to shoot, what we may be doing is ingraining bad habits into you from their point of view, stuff that they have to try and correct, and you're going to see in psychology that habit building is very powerful. We're going to actually use that as one of our major tools in the psychology module. So habit building is so powerful that they're going to have a hell of a time trying to fix those habits to change them and do what they want you to do in pipeline and be successful. So we don't want to get really in technical detail with follow-on skills. We don't want you to develop bad habits. What we want to do is expose you to enough of those follow-on skills and what we call CTXs, comprehensive training exercise. We're going to put you in enough of those situations where you start to feel the use of that psychology, of that physiology, of those critical skills all together, okay? Because this is what you're going to do in pipeline. And if you have experience at this level, which is at the top of that pyramid that I drew in a previous lesson, okay? I talk about building a pyramid. You got psychology, which allows you to use your physiology to most potential, and then when you can use your body to most potential, it allows you to execute your critical skills as best you can. And once you've done that, you can worry about those follow-on skills. Or you don't even have to worry about those follow-on skills. You can just practice these three. But if you practice these three together, and you get used to using them together as one unit, and you go into pipeline with that level of readiness, I have no doubt that you will pass completely. Because you have covered all three of the major areas and even had time to kind of touch on the fourth one, which is where you're going to be working at the end of pipeline. So when you do pipeline, in a way, if you do this, in a way, you've already done pipeline to some extent. Now, we haven't put you through the mental and physical kind of punishment exercises and evolutions to the extent that your pipeline probably will. But you've learned all the basic skills and started to get some kind of a mastery of them to the point where when it comes time to use them again in pipeline, you've already got this in the bag, right? You already know what you're doing. So that's our goal. That's what we're trying to accomplish. We talk about attrition. We designed a program to counter all these common causes of attrition, both including the mental, the physical, and the technical. We try and roll it all up into one training program and culminate in focusing on stuff like follow-on skills or even comprehensive exercises where you're not particularly learning new bits and pieces anymore, but you're starting to apply this stuff. We want you to start applying it before you start pipeline, because then it ain't your first rodeo anymore, so to speak. And if that's the case, you're going to be a lot more successful through pipeline. Even if it's a little bit harder, a little bit different than what you've gone through with us, you're going to have a little bit of familiarity there, and that becomes important psychologically to you. So the next thing we're going to talk about is a whole recap of INDOC, which I'm sure you're glad is finally here. And then we can start moving on to the nuts and bolts of stuff. We can get into psychology, we can start learning stuff that's useful, that you can start learning tips to apply and see changes in yourself. If you haven't already learned a whole bunch of stuff, what you probably might feel right now is that you've learned a whole ton of stuff that you really had no idea about. And hopefully you do feel that way, and that's good. So you're going to continue that positive progression of skills with some specific psychology. So all this stuff I touched on in very basics, we're going to cover it once again at the end of INDOC, and then we're going to start getting into a little more detail so you can really understand how this stuff works and how your brain ticks and all that. So as always, contact us by phone, email, comment system if you need to, ask us questions or whatever, or just tell us how we're doing. If you like the content, if you like the videos, not necessarily that we're going to change them if you don't like them or if you don't think we're doing it your way, but if you think that something would be more effective, or if you like the way we did something because it was memorable for you, make sure you let us know that so we can kind of tailor our stuff to what works best for you guys. That's what we're interested in. We're interested in ultimate effectiveness of the program. And of course, like, so other people can find this, subscribe to get all the new stuff, and visit the website that has all sorts of other resources at sotfoundation.org.